house was silent that night, yet the voices carried through the walls as if the walls themselves were listening. I was 14, standing in the hallway with a damp papier-mâché mask trembling in my hands, a black cat I'd been making for Halloween. The newspaper strips were still wet, and the paste clung to my fingers like unspoken promises. Under the faint glow seeping from beneath the living room door, the mask's silver-lined eyes seemed to pity me. I wasn't meant to hear them, but their words drifted through the cracks like smoke. "You can take Hunter," my father said, his tone steady and firm. "I'll keep Poppy," my mother answered, calm but tired. "And Coraline? Let the court decide." I stared at the mask, its paper skin sagging under the weight of moisture, its face drooping into sadness I hadn't planned. In that moment, I knew I didn't truly belong to anyone anymore. Our home in Salem wasn't big, but it had always felt enough. It smelled of sawdust and antiseptic, my father's wood shop and my mother's hospital shifts blending into one familiar scent. In the evenings, those smells mixed with dinner, creating what I once called home. Dad, Richard James, built furniture when work came in. His hands were rough, splintered, and skilled. He could turn bare wood into something that seemed to grow into its shape naturally. People said he had magic in his fingers, though lately, those hands gripped beer bottles more often than chisels. Mom, Eliza, worked as an ER nurse, always tired, her scrubs carrying the scent of bleach and coffee. She moved quickly, gracefully even when exhausted, except lately, when her pace turned hurried, especially through any room Dad was in. My brother Hunter, 16, was the golden child and captain of the football team, loud laughter and a smile that excused everything. His room overflowed with trophies and laundry alike. He could charm everyone, but couldn't keep our family together. My sister Poppy, only 9, was all innocence and bedtime stories. She collected stuffed animals and named each after a flower. Her room was bright, pink and yellow, filled with crayon drawings of us holding hands beneath smiling suns. In her pictures, we were always side by side, and me? I was in between, quiet, the girl with glue on her hands and imagination in her scraps. Papier-mâché was my voice when speaking felt too heavy or too empty. I'd rip old newspapers, mix flour and water, stir until smooth. The paste clung to my palms like something fragile but hopeful, messy yet binding. I loved watching paper become something strong, a face, a mask, an identity for a little while. But that night, when I heard them divide their children like household items after a sale, the mask in my hands suddenly felt as fragile as I did. I slipped back to my room before they finished, closing my door quietly enough to go unnoticed. Setting the cat mask on my desk to dry, I saw a tear had fallen onto it, leaving a small crater in the wet surface. I didn't try to fix it. Some damage feels too honest to hide. That night, I left my window open, letting the October chill creep in. Salem always changed as Halloween neared, the air charged, the streets alive. Visitors said it was the ghosts. We locals just knew it was the season itself. I wondered if I'd still be here next Halloween, if I'd still be making masks at all. By morning, the mask had dried, the teardrop dent still visible, right where its heart would be if cats wore theirs outside. A month later, the illusion of family finally broke. I sat in the Essex County Juvenile Court, my legs trembling so hard my heels clicked against the polished wooden floor, an uncomfortably loud sound in a room built for silence. The air carried the scent of paper and burnt coffee. Sharp, not comforting. Dad sat on one side of the courtroom, Mom on the other. The space between them made visible the distance that had grown for years. Hunter sat next to Dad, chin lifted as if he already understood the world and his place in it. Poppy wasn't there. They said she was too young. I wondered who was watching her. Probably Aunt Ashley, Mom's sister, who always smelled of cinnamon gum and looked at me like she was searching for which parent I resembled most. The Department of Children and Families report was read aloud. I remember every word, even though I wish I didn't. The formal language made our family sound like a failed case study. Neither parent has provided a specific care plan for Coraline James, the social worker said. The judge's voice carried no emotion, only procedure. I watched her face, wondering if she had children, if she understood what it meant to be overlooked. Since both parents failed to present a plan, she continued, the court grants temporary custody of the minor, Coraline James, to the Department of Children and Families. I searched for someone to meet my eyes. Mom kept her gaze fixed on the floor, her plain nurse's shoes motionless on the carpet. Dad checked his phone, as if something on the screen mattered more than my future. When the judge asked if I had anything to say, the words came out before I could think. I just want to be somewhere someone actually wants me. No one spoke. The silence felt like an answer. Miss Rodriguez, the DCF worker, stood nearby, clipboard in hand, face kind but weary. Her dark hair was tied neatly back, her eyes soft yet tired. She had only been assigned to my case a few days earlier, but she already felt like the only steady adult left in my life. We returned to what was once my home so I could pack. Mom handed me an old canvas tote, its handles worn and frayed from use. She said nothing as I moved through the room that had been mine for 14 years. Poppy wasn't there either. Mom had sent her to Aunt Ashley's, maybe afraid my leaving would make her question if she was next. I packed what little I wanted. A few shirts, jeans, my sketchbook, and my half-finished black cat mask. I left behind posters, books, everything too heavy for one bag or my heart. I turned to Miss Rodriguez, my voice low. Can I please stay just one more night? Tomorrow's Halloween, and I want to see my sister before I go. Please. Her eyes softened with sympathy before she spoke. Sweetheart, I know this is hard, she said gently but firmly. But there are other kids waiting for a place too. Come on now. She rested a comforting hand on my shoulder as we walked to her car. A light drizzle began to fall. Salem in late October wasn't the cozy New England postcard people imagined. It was gray, cold, and unkind. The cat mask lay inside my tote, the corner sticking out. By the time I noticed, the rain had soaked it. When Miss Rodriguez pulled away from the curb, I saw the paper edges curling, the silver paint bleeding across the face. Half of it was ruined. I pressed what remained to my chest and whispered words no one could hear. Even the mask hadn't survived this. My first foster home was in Lynn, a small tan house that smelled like bleach and meatloaf. From outside, it looked ordinary. Trimmed lawn, flag by the door, a wreath announcing the next holiday. Inside, it was different. The Carters ran their home like a strict camp disguised as a family. Mr. Carter had never served, but he spoke about discipline as if it were gospel. Mrs. Carter smiled too much, her warmth feeling practiced. Lights out at 9, even on weekends. Doors never closed. Crying after lights out wasn't allowed. It upset the younger kids. There were 3 foster children, including me, plus their 2 biological kids. Their own children had private rooms. We shared. I was paired with Lacey, a 10-year-old who cried quietly into her pillow each night after Mrs. Carter's room checks. She had been there 7 months and already mastered silent tears. I kept my ruined mask and sketchbook in the drawer beneath my bed. The mask was beyond repair, but I couldn't throw it away. At night, when the house finally stilled, I'd pull out my sketchbook and draw new masks. Foxes, wolves, faces with calm eyes unlike any I knew. I sketched them in pencil, tracing lines in the black pen I still had. I imagined the colors I'd use if I could, the textures I'd layer if I had the materials. On paper, I could still create worlds where faces changed and identities could be remade. One afternoon, their teenage son Brett found my sketchbook while I was in the bathroom. When I came back, he was flipping through the pages, his face twisted between curiosity and mockery. What are you? Some kind of freak? Gonna wear a different mask every day? He said, laughing as he held it out of reach. I grabbed the notebook back, maybe too roughly. My hand brushed his, and he yelped dramatically before flashing a smug grin. By dinner, Mr. Carter had called DCF. The report said I had trouble adjusting and showed aggressive behavior toward the biological children. Miss Rodriguez didn't sound convinced when she called to tell me she'd be coming the next day. It didn't matter what day it was. The decision had already been made. When Ms. Rodriguez arrived with her clipboard and kind, practiced smile, everything felt final. I didn't pack much. Just my broken mask, a sketchbook, and a few clothes. 1 month, 2 homes. Before I left, Lacey caught my hand in the hallway. Her small fingers were cold against mine. Don't go, she whispered, eyes wide and wet. When people leave, they never come back. I crouched beside her, feeling older than my 14 years. I'll come back, I said. Maybe not me, but my drawings will. I'll find a way to send them to you. It wasn't true, but it gave her and me something to hold on to. Something that made me believe I could leave behind a piece of myself that mattered. Ms. Rodriguez waited by the door, pretending not to hear us. When I joined her, she gave my shoulder a gentle squeeze. "Sometimes the first placement isn't the right one," she said as we got into her car. "We'll find somewhere better." I stayed quiet. By then, I had learned that silence felt safer than hope. The second house had 6 beds, all occupied. It was a large, aging Victorian with chipped paint and drafty windows, sitting on a corner lot in Peabody. Its old charm lingered in the curved staircase and tall ceilings. The Davenports smiled a lot when the social worker visited, but their smiles were thin and practiced. They took in 5 foster kids mostly for the stipends, treating us more like tenants than family. I slept on the top bunk above Tricia, a 16-year-old who had been in the system since she was 7. She explained the unspoken rules my first night. Don't leave anything valuable out. Lock your backpack at school. Allowance is $30 a month, but they'll cut it if you miss curfew, even by a minute. Don't ask for seconds at dinner. And don't get attached to anything or anyone. The Davenports weren't cruel, just efficient. We had clean clothes, regular meals, and a roof. What we didn't have was warmth, conversation, or any sense that we belonged. At night, I kept making masks in secret with whatever I could find: torn magazine pages from the recycling bin, cereal boxes, paste made from flour and water borrowed quietly from the kitchen. I couldn't afford the mess papier-mâché usually made, so I worked late, cleaning every trace before morning. These masks were smaller, simpler than before, but they were mine, made in that narrow space between obligation and sleep. 3 weeks after leaving, I tried calling Mom. It went straight to voicemail. Her recorded voice sounded happier than I remembered, telling me to leave a message. I didn't. Dad said he'd call when his job site wrapped up, but he never did. Only Poppy remembered me. One day, Ms. Rodriguez brought a small Halloween card she'd sent through DCF. It was store-bought, with a black cat drawn in crayon beside the printed greeting. Inside, in her careful 3rd-grade handwriting, it read, "I miss you. Will you be home next Halloween? Love, Poppy." I saved part of my allowance for 3 weeks to buy a cheap card from CVS. Inside, I drew a silver cat and wrote, "I miss you too. Maybe next Halloween." It wasn't true, but it was a gentle lie. The kind that softens what's too hard to say out loud. I didn't know where I would end up next, or if I'd even have a home again by Halloween. November turned into December, then January. Winter in Massachusetts is harsh, but at least it reflected how I felt inside, cold and waiting for a change that never seemed to come. By February, I was starting my 3rd school in 4 months. Each time, I carried my class schedule on a folded piece of paper, wandering hallways where everyone else already seemed to belong. I sat alone during lunch, sketching in my notebook, faces that always seemed to look back at me. In March, the Davenports told Miss Rodriguez they could no longer meet my needs. I hadn't caused any problems. I barely spoke. But sometimes silence makes its own kind of demand. Maybe it was because I never gave them a reason to dock my allowance. Miss Rodriguez appeared again, clipboard in hand, gentle eyes that had become familiar. "I'm sorry, Coraline," she said softly. "We're going to try somewhere else. 3 months, 3 homes." I was beginning to understand that some people simply don't stay. After the Davenports filed a non-compliance report, DCF decided to move me to a youth shelter. Miss Rodriguez did her best to reassure me, but I'd stopped believing in comfort. 3 months later, she returned, this time with something new in her expression. Hope. "Coraline," she said, sitting beside me on the porch steps, away from the shelter's noise. "We've found a pre-adoptive home for you." She spoke the words carefully. "They live in Salem. They've been approved and are excited to meet you. Back to Salem." The words stirred something faint inside me. Not quite hope, but familiarity. The place where it all started, I thought. "Who are they?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Dr. Miguel Garcia is a pediatrician at North Shore Children's Hospital," she explained. "His wife, Lucia, teaches art at Collins Middle School. Their son, Julian, is in his 1st year of college. They've been considering adoption for some time. An art teacher." The words echoed in my mind, opening a door I thought was long closed. The next day, Miss Rodriguez drove me to Salem. The trees were just beginning to change, spots of red and gold among the green. Autumn in Salem carries its own kind of quiet magic, one even sadness can't erase. The Garcias lived in a blue colonial house on a quiet, maple-lined street. It wasn't large, but it had a wraparound porch with real rocking chairs, like something from an old movie. Wind chimes hung from the eaves, creating soft melodies in the wind. The house smelled of cinnamon and turpentine, a strange but comforting mix. Inside, the living room walls were covered with colorful paintings full of motion, landscapes, faces and abstract forms. They had a cat. Two, a sleepy orange tabby named Mango watching me from the windowsill. Dr. Garcia, please, call me Miguel, had kind eyes behind wire-framed glasses and a careful, genuine smile. Lucia. Just Lucia. Please. Had paint-stained fingers and silver strands running through her dark hair. When they spoke, they looked at me directly, not through me, not past me, like so many others had. That first night, Lucia brought hot chocolate to my room, not instant, but thick and rich, made from real chocolate with a hint of cinnamon. She sat on the edge of the bed they'd prepared for me, covered in a quilt of blues and greens. "We're not here to replace anyone," she said, her voice warm and clear. "We just want you to feel safe. And maybe if you choose, we could become a family someday. But there's no rush, Coraline. No pressure." Her words were simple, but they hurt a little, because after so many moves, having a choice felt too big to believe. The next morning, Lucia took me downstairs to her art studio. The basement was wide and open, its concrete floors painted with swirling patterns of blue and gold. Easels stood in one corner, a pottery wheel in another. Shelves held clay, brushes, colored paper, and jars of paint. She handed me a bowl of paste, just flour and water mixed smooth, and the smell hit me with memory. "Miguel said you make masks," she said. "Do you still like doing that?" I nodded, surprised he remembered such a small detail from my file. Lucia smiled. "Then this room is yours too, whenever you want it." That weekend, I made another mask, the first since that night in the hallway. Paper mache again, built carefully, layer by layer, smoothing each edge with my fingers. This time, I recreated the old one from memory, but instead of hiding the crack, I brushed it with silver paint to honor the break, not conceal it. A line of fracture turned beautiful. When it dried, I hung it on my wall. It was the first thing I'd made in months that felt entirely mine. Not borrowed, not hidden. It was made without fear. That was the first time I thought maybe broken things could still be worth keeping. The Garcias didn't push. They offered consistency without control, kindness without pressure. Miguel came home for dinner almost every night, sharing stories about his young patients. Lucia often talked about art and her students, asking casually about my day without pressing for details I wasn't ready to share. She and Miguel invited me to join video calls with their son, Julian, who was studying engineering at MIT. Julian showed me his dorm room, introduced his roommate, and asked about the books I was reading or the drawings I was working on. Not once did he make me feel like I was intruding or replacing him. Gradually, almost without noticing, I began to open up. I started speaking more during dinner, spending long hours in Lucia's basement studio, creating not only masks but also sculptures, paintings, and collages. I began doing my homework at the kitchen table instead of staying hidden in my room. Miss Rodriguez continued her visits, clipboard still in hand but less imposing now. Each time she asked if I was happy there, and with every visit my answer grew more certain. 4 months after arriving, I finally said it. Yes, I want to stay. The process that followed wasn't easy. There were hearings, paperwork, and evaluations. The same system that had once moved me so effortlessly from place to place now seemed hesitant to let me remain where I truly belonged. But the Garcias never faltered. They attended every court session, completed every document, and answered every question with calm determination. For the first time, someone was willing to fight for me. When I turned 15, a letter arrived in the mail. My name was written in handwriting I knew well, sharp and precise, like the notes my mother used to write at work. Miguel handed it to me at breakfast, his face careful, unreadable. "You don't have to read it now," he said gently, "or ever. If you don't want to." I took it to my room and sat cross-legged on the bed, the envelope heavy in my hands. Mango, the cat, jumped beside me, purring as if offering comfort. Inside was a single sheet of cream-colored stationery with my mother's name embossed at the top. She had remarried, David Connors, a hospital manager she met at work, and now had a stepson, 10 years old. They had moved into a new home in Marblehead. The letter was polite, written like a family update sent during the holidays. She asked how school was going and mentioned that Poppy was taking ballet lessons. There was no explanation for her choices, no recognition of the silence between us, only neat sentences that tried to mimic closeness. At the end, she wrote, "We'd love to hear from you when you're ready." I folded the letter carefully, placed it back in its envelope, and slid it under my pillow. That night, I lay awake feeling its presence beneath my head, a fragile paper link to someone who had once been my whole world. The next morning, I asked Lucia if I could use her special stationery, the one with watercolor flowers around the edges. I wrote back to my mother. My handwriting was uneven, but my words were steady. I told her about the Garcias, my new school, and how I'd started making masks again. I asked if I could visit for Halloween. 2 weeks later, her reply came, "We're still adjusting to our new family dynamics, sweetheart. Maybe next year." Not long after, my dad called. His voice sounded just the same, warm and familiar. The one that used to read bedtime stories. He said he was getting married to Rebecca Moore, his high school sweetheart before my mother. She had twin daughters, 11 years old. He mentioned that Hunter had been accepted into college. When I asked if I could visit for Halloween, there was a pause. I could hear him take a breath before saying, "Rebecca thinks adding another teen might confuse her girls right now. You understand, right, kiddo?" I said I did. They both had new families now, and I was just a memory, a remnant from a chapter they'd closed. That night, I cried for the first time since moving in with the Garcias. Not the quiet tears I'd learned to hide in foster care, but full, aching sobs I couldn't stop. Lucia found me curled up on my bed. Clutching my pillow, she didn't speak. She simply sat beside me, resting a gentle hand on my back. She stayed there until my sobs softened into hiccups and my breathing returned to calm. "Sometimes," she said at last, "the people who should love us the most simply can't. It isn't because of anything we did or failed to do. It's because of something damaged within them." She touched my cheek. Softly. "That doesn't make you unlovable, Coraline. It only means they couldn't recognize how special you are." In that instant, something inside me shifted. Not healing, that would take time, but understanding. The emptiness I felt wasn't shaped like me. It was shaped like them. By 16, I had been living with the Garcias for over a year. The court had extended my pre-adoptive placement, with one last hearing left before permanent adoption. Their house had begun to feel like home. My room. Truly mine. And Miguel and Lucia felt like more than temporary caretakers. October in Salem glowed again, jack-o'-lanterns flickering on porches, webs stretched across bushes, and laughter echoing through streets filled with tourists chasing witchy excitement. That Halloween, I dressed as a silver witch, wearing a papier-mâché mask I'd crafted myself, covered in silver leaf, turning my face into something almost otherworldly. The Garcias hosted a neighborhood party for the kids. I spent the evening painting faces, turning children into tigers, butterflies, and zombies. Their laughter filled the room like music, and the way they trusted me with their smiles felt like a gift I hadn't realized I needed. But still, I avoided the corner where my old house stood. I couldn't bring myself to look. Some ghosts don't need faces. They just settle quietly in your chest, reminding you they exist during moments of stillness. When I got home, tired but content, Miguel and Lucia called me into the living room. They sat together on the sofa, hands clasped, on the coffee table an iPad glowed. Julian was calling from college, his expression serious. Miguel cleared his throat, his usually calm voice trembling slightly. "Coraline, we wanted to tell you this together, if you're ready," he said, glancing at Lucia. She nodded. "We'd like to adopt you. Officially. To make you a permanent part of our family." Julian smiled through the screen. "I'd love to have a sister like you, if you'd want that too." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. No one had ever said they wanted me, not by obligation, but by choice. I looked at their faces. 3 people who loved me simply because they chose to. Miguel, with his gentle eyes behind wireframes. Lucia, with paint always under her fingernails. Julian, with his easy warmth. I cried. But it wasn't the painful kind. It was the kind that washes everything clean. Yes, I said, steady despite the tears. I want that too. That Halloween, I became Coraline Garcia. Not legally yet. The paperwork would take months. But in my heart, I belonged. I had chosen a family that had already chosen me. The adoption took months to complete, but for once, time seemed to move in the right direction. There were meetings with lawyers, court visits, and endless paperwork. Birth parents were contacted for consent. They signed the surrender papers without objection. The court ordered 6 more months of supervision before final approval. When the judge asked if I agreed to the adoption, I said yes. My voice didn't waver. My birth parents weren't there, of course, but Poppy sent a letter with a small cat doodle in the corner. You'll always be the bravest sister I know. Love forever, Poppy. I kept it tucked inside my sketchbook, beside a photo of my new family, Miguel, Lucia, Julian, and me, standing in front of the courthouse the day the pre-adoption agreement was approved. We were all smiling, but mine stretched the widest, open in a way it hadn't been for years. High school finally felt like a place I belonged, not one I just passed through. I joined the art club, made real friends who enjoyed spending time at our home. I helped Lucia with her after-school art program, teaching kids how to make masks from paper plates and simple materials. With Lucia's encouragement, I applied to art schools, my portfolio filled with masks, sculptures, and paintings about transformation. When the acceptance letters arrived from Riest, Mass Art, and Parsons, the Garcias threw a celebration. Dinner that evening featured a cake Lucia had decorated to resemble an artist's palette. I chose Mass Art, close enough to visit home often, yet far enough to feel like a fresh start. Julian, then finishing his final year at MIT, helped me move into my dorm. He carried boxes and assembled furniture with the quiet ease of a brother who had always accepted me as his own. College opened doors I'd never imagined. I fell in love with sculpture beyond masks, experimenting with clay, metal, and wood. My professors encouraged me to broaden my perspective, to see art not only as self-expression but as a dialogue. Still, masks remained my passion, my hallmark. I tried new materials, leather, fabric, wire mesh, even found objects. Each piece became both a disguise and a revelation, a balance between concealment and truth. In my junior year, one of my professors submitted my work to a student exhibit in a small South End gallery. 3 masks from my transformation series were accepted, each symbolizing a stage of growth. At the opening, the Garcias came, all 3 of them, dressed neatly and glowing with pride. They stood beside me as guests admired my work and asked about my inspiration, my technique, my message. Your daughter has remarkable talent, someone told Lucia. She smiled, squeezing my hand. Yes, she said, she does. Your daughter. Those words settled over me like a blessing. Boston feels nothing like Salem. Its air sharper, filled with rain-soaked concrete, coffee, and endless possibility. At 25, I run a small studio tucked between a bakery and a thrift shop in Jamaica Plain. It isn't large, but the east-facing windows fill it with morning light that makes even half-finished projects glow. Above the door hangs a sign, Paper Souls, Masks and Art by Coraline Garcia. I take on commissions, masks for stage plays and installations for office spaces, but every Saturday, I teach children how to make masks from recycled paper and flour paste. Just as I once did at 14, their hands get messy. Their laughter fills the room as they turn simple scraps into faces that amuse, frighten, or intrigue. Some talk about their families, their stories bubbling over. I listen, happy for them. Others stay quiet, working alone while the rest chatter. Those are the ones I help most gently, kneeling beside them, guiding without pressure. Together, we create faces not to hide behind, but to reveal who we hope to become when we're ready. Each year, I send Poppy a new mask, one covered in gold leaf, another painted in twilight blue, another woven with copper wire that glows like flame. Every piece is a promise that we're still connected, still sisters, despite the years, the distance, and our different names. She's now in college, studying psychology at UMass Amherst. When she's home, we meet for coffee, our visits becoming more natural each time. She updates me on our mother, who divorced David Connors after 3 years, on our father, now content with Rebecca and her daughters. On Hunter, working in finance in New York, married with a baby on the way. I listen with genuine curiosity, learning about people who share my blood, if not my daily life. Sometimes, I notice a flicker of longing in Poppy's eyes, wondering, maybe, what it might have been like if our family had stayed together, if I had never left. But I don't share that feeling. What broke once gave me the freedom I needed, even if the break hurt. This October, I received a package from Poppy. She's 20 now. Her laugh still carrying the warmth of the little sister I once tucked into bed. Inside was a note, open on Halloween night, so I waited, just as she asked. That evening, the Garcias joined me for dinner. Lucia brought empanadas made from her grandmother's recipe. Miguel carved a pumpkin that looked suspiciously like our cat, Mango Julian, visiting from California, arrived with wine and stories from his latest engineering project. We ate, we laughed, and retold the old tale about the night I spilled paste all over their carpet trying to make a papier-mâché phoenix far beyond my skills. Once an embarrassing memory, it now felt like a cherished family story. When they left, promising to come back for Sunday brunch, I opened Poppy's package. Inside was a silver papier-mâché cat mask, its edges slightly uneven, the paint a bit thick in places. It wasn't flawless, clearly made by someone new to the craft, yet its sincerity made it beautiful. Beneath it lay a small card. This year, I made my own silver cat mask. I was thinking of you. I hung it on my studio wall beside the one I created at 16, the one that had once been broken, then remade with silver paint into something truer. Standing before both masks, one crafted by me, one for me, I whispered softly into the quiet room. You're always here with me, and in that moment, I believed it completely. Sometimes, visitors ask about my studio's name, Paper Souls. I tell them paper alone is fragile, but when layered carefully with the right adhesive, it becomes far stronger than anyone expects. People are much the same, I explain. Layer by layer, we rebuild ourselves until we can endure whatever life brings. When my students remove their dried masks from the molds, the room fills with laughter and delight, a chorus of surprise as they realize they've created something lasting from what seemed so delicate. That sound, once lost to me, reminds me how joy often grows from unexpected transformations. Each Halloween, when the Garcias come to my studio, we hang our new masks together. Mine, silver and steady after years of practice. Lucia's, bright and bold with the ease of an artist. Miguel's, precise and detailed like his work as a doctor. Julian's, mechanical and inventive, with moving parts that shift in the light. And now Poppy's, careful but heartfelt, joins our growing wall of faces. Sometimes I wonder what my birth parents would think if they saw this wall, a family created, not born. I doubt they'd understand. Some people never see the beauty that can grow from a crack, but I've learned that family isn't about who you begin with. It's who stays to help repair what breaks. It's those who notice your flaws and still choose to stay, helping you turn them into something richer, more real. At 30, I received an invitation to Hunter's daughter's first birthday, my niece, a thought that felt both strange and wonderful. I sent a small mask for her room, soft felt and ribbon forming a tiny silver cat. The tradition continued. I didn't attend. Some distances can't be crossed with a single gesture, but I included my phone number, a small opening, if not yet a door. A week later, Hunter called. His voice was deeper now, but carried the same steady tone. Coraline, he said, she loves it. It's hanging above her crib. We talked for nearly an hour, awkward at first, then easier. He asked about my art and studio. I asked about his wife, his daughter, his life in New York. Neither of us mentioned our parents. Some silences are understandings, not omissions. Before we ended the call, he said quietly, I should have done more back then. I was just a kid, but still. We all should have, I replied. But we're doing something now. It wasn't quite forgiveness, but it was a beginning. A new layer added to an old shape. When I was 14, holding that wet papier-mâché mask in the hallway, I couldn't have imagined this life. I didn't know that being left behind would lead to being chosen, or that breaking could make room for strength. No one gets to decide your worth just because they walked away. Love isn't tied to blood. It's built by those who stay, who see your cracks and still hold you close. If you were me, would you have forgiven them? Would you have gone back or stayed with those who truly chose you? For me, the answer is simple. I'm Coraline Garcia, and this is the mask I repaired. Not the one that crumbled long ago, but the one I wear every day, my identity. Rebuilt from the pieces that survived, layer by layer, tier by tier, choice by choice. It isn't perfect, but it's beautiful, it's strong, and above all, it's mine. Each night, as I turn off the studio lights that shine on dozens of masks, I think of that 14-year-old girl, standing in a hallway, holding a fragile creation, hearing words that changed everything. I wish I could tell her, the breaking wasn't the end, it was the beginning of something new. A story about how sometimes we must lose the masks others made for us before. We can shape the ones that truly fit. And as I walk home, through the crisp autumn air, I carry one truth with me. There is no wound too deep that art cannot touch, no fracture too wide that love cannot bridge, and no mask so broken that it can't be transformed into something even more beautiful than before. That is the inheritance I've claimed. That is the legacy I'll leave behind. That is the mask I repaired.